Good morning, and thank you, Lagos, for staying tuned to Smooth 98.1. Today is cold. It's a Wednesday, the 17th of July, 2019. Please stay warm wherever you are and stay tuned because we're about to bring you detailed analysis of the newspaper stories this morning. And joining us in the studio, we have Gbolahan at Mr. G Quest. Good morning, Gbolahan.
Good morning, Valentine. Good morning, Ayo. And
Good
good morning,
morning.
Lagos.
And the Kuban himself, Devoe Okorie, is here. Good morning, Devoe.
Good morning, Lagos.
Hey.
Cool, where's the beef?
Check out that voice.
Mhm.
Boom. Well done. All right, let's start very quickly. But a reminder here we have different channels you can communicate with us through.
Yes, you can. You can use our WhatsApp platform. That's 0809 444 0981. 0809 444 0981. Or if you prefer Twitter, we're live there. Use the hashtag freshlypressed981. That's at smooth981fm. Also, we're streaming live on YouTube, so you might want to go on there and use the live chat option to send in your messages as well.
Thank you, Ayo. From the Vanguard newspaper, I'll start with this first story. Gbolahan. Minimum wage. Federal government has decided to commence payment for workers below the 30,000 naira benchmark. Said the workers who have been paid below that, according to the chairman, National Salaries, Income and Wages Commission, Chief Richard Egbule. He said this while addressing a news conference in Abuja on the implementation of the new national minimum wage, saying that the federal public service workers currently earning below the minimum wage should be paid as approved by the president, Muhammadu Buhari. Your thoughts on this story?
Yes, we've been having this minimum wage issue going on for several months now, and the president finally signed it into law April 18, 2000 and um,
18.
2018. And no, actually, it wasn't signed into law in April. It was signed
No, it
into law
was.
this year,
But
actually.
they're saying the approval takes
So,
effect from April
so
18th.
the approval takes effect from April 18, 2018. So
Mm.
the president actually signed it into law just a few months ago,
Mhm.
just before the elections
Mhm.
were concluded. Well, it's a good move. The chairman of the National Salaries, Income and Wages Commission mentioned that the implementation is going to take immediate effect. But the comments that he also made after that is that the the payment, commencement of the approval payment will be determined by the office of the accountant general.
Mm.
So invariably, what he's saying then that the buck stops on the accountant general's table,
Mhm.
and then that's when payments would commence. Um, I mean, there's been a lot of back and forth about how government is going to be able to afford this. Well, minimum wage, the approval so far is talking about those that are currently earning below 30,000 naira.
Mm.
All other workers that are earning above 30,000 naira, that is still being negotiated when the payment would commence. But for those earning below 30,000 naira, payment should commence now. But the thing is, question that we've been asking is, where's this money coming from? Can the government afford this?
Mm.
And when we look at our budget deficit that we've got in the country, every year the government is borrowing nothing less than about 2 trillion naira. We're borrowing to fund our activities and to fund our budget. A lot of all the revenues that are being expected to be raised by the ministries and departments and agencies, government agencies in the country, we are raising far below what is expected. I mean, last year's budget, as at close of last year, we were only able to raise 50% of the revenue that we were expecting to raise. So where is this money coming from? I agree with the whole idea of the minimum wage going up, because of course when we look at the inflationary trend of things,
Mm.
a lot of things are beyond the reach of the average Nigerian.
Mm.
And when you're talking about living well, people need to earn well to live a decent life.
Mm.
If you're not earning well, then of course, when we look at all the insecurities that is happening in the country, it's because of the lifestyle, the way people live. People are not living well. So, of course, I do agree with it. But the bone of contention is, how are we going to be able to afford this minimum wage? And that's the reason why this matter of paying the minimum wage has been dragging for so long.
Mm.
I mean, it's been passed into law several months ago,
Mm.
but we still haven't talked about paying it. And the payment, once we start paying it,
Mm.
they're going to it's going to be backdated.
Yes, and just to answer your question on regarding the time, the delay, they've given reasons over time, bordering on the fact that they need to understand, make sure that all the systems are put in place, necessary adjustments made, consumer price index that we discussed yesterday, to ensure that price of goods and services products are affordable enough for the consumer who is a salary earner, and to ensure that for every level of governments, from federal to state levels, the accountant generals and everybody who falls in line in the line of authority that gets to approve these funds, said funds to be paid to the workers, have their books in place to ensure that everybody receives the payment as at when due.
Yes, that's what they've said. But the main crux is, how are we going to be able to afford this?
Because basically, if you run a business, right? If you're going to prepare a budget for your annual budget, this is just, playing devil's advocate here, but if you're going to prepare your annual budget, you ensure that even if you say let's increase salaries across board, a lot of factors will be put in place. First, you consider your expenses vis-a-vis your income and everything balances, because you'll be running at a loss if you decide to increase your worker salary and yet your income is not even commensurate.
Which is what I've just said. We are not generating enough revenue as it stands, and we are running a budget deficit of about 2 trillion we're borrowing money. Invariably, what we're doing is that we're borrowing to pay salaries. What we should be talking about, what the government should have been talking about, is looking at making government more efficient. We should be looking at trimming down the staff strength and making the government more efficient. But unfortunately, that is an unpopular move to do, because if you're going to do that, of course, that would mean that you need to be laying off people and sacking people before you can now talk about increasing the minimum wage and paying people more.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. We have a message from Joe in Oregon.
Yeah, Joe from Oregon says, when inflation is at 11%, no minimum wage can keep up. And then Vincent Mecca says on this, it's a good move. However, it is obvious that some states will be in big trouble paying. Where is the money coming from?
Exactly, echoing Gbolahan's question. Next story, we take this next Vanguard newspaper going to Devoe for this story. Northern Elders Forum, CNGs order herdsmen out of South. When I saw this headline, it was pretty scary to read, as the Northern Elders Forum held a meeting late last night. They are decrying, obviously, the deteriorating security situation, and it has taken a new turn across the country with a call for the uproar around herdsmen. It seems as if every single attack, every single security situation is pegged to herdsmen. So they're concerned about their livelihood, or maybe the safety of their people. So they're asking the herdsmen to relocate back to the north. How does this reverberate in your ears, Devoe? What do you make of the story?
Well, first of all, I wanted to really headline the story as hashtag how to drive a nation to civil unrest. And this has not started today. We have carefully watched this breakdown within the past, let's call it 4 to 6 years, okay? Now, so we're not surprised at the situation we have now. Now, what is going on at this point in time? Yes, the Northern Elders Forum and then also the coalition of northern groups have ordered the Fulani herdsmen to leave the southern parts of the country and to return to the north, fearing safety of their cows, which are not guaranteed. Now, this was expressed following some certain actions, okay? Now, and the NEF chairman, that's the Northern Elders, that's Professor Anglo Abdullahi, was speaking in support of the youths who had decried utterances of the southern governors. Now, if you remember recently, 9 of the southern governors came together to jointly ban the movement of herdsmen with their cattle via the usual bush routes, which are the grazing routes. What they instructed was that if they must get to the areas of market, they must move them via trucks, via roads where they can be seen. Obviously, this was based on the fact that the issues where they were blamed of committing not just attacks but also destroying farmland
and even kidnappings and all that,
and properties stealthily across the night through bush paths. Now, likewise, this was also escalated with the tension that arose from many of the southern leaders blaming Fashona's death. That was the daughter of the Pan-Yoruba Association of Fenifere on the Fulani, coming on the heels of Gani Adams, Fani Kayode, Yinka Odumaki. Now, what they have, and in some places they were banters of war. Now, what they've done, they've taken this position, they've said that their security is no longer guaranteed. Now, I mean, are we just to start looking at this story and be wondering what's going on here? If you backtrack down memory lane, you will remember at some point how the Ruga initiative actually frayed nerves.
Yes.
And at some point, the government had to put a suspension on it because the understanding was not right, and how the reactions came from, especially from the different regions. And even the aspect that was not really spoken about, whereby some other anonymous, well, I'm not calling them anonymous, they had a name, but they're unscrupulous because many people didn't know them. Northern group of youths came up on TV and instructed that Ruga must be, that any southern state that doesn't allow it.
That was mischievous.
That was quite mischievous. But it did lend to a lot of the tension that took place.
Exactly.
Was it by force? I thought the end of the government said it was a matter of choice for the state government. And if you track this, we have been having sporadic issues of insecurity, largely that were tied to the herdsmen clashes. Even when the president did announce any herdsman that was carrying a gun, which was illegal, must be arrested. Yet we still saw various attacks taking place in different places. Now, just when you thought that insecurity, you had seen the worst of it, given the fact that we have been also dealing with kidnapping that had become sporadic around the country, banditry in different locations, which we've not been able to quell or bring to some conclusive end, and also terrorism. Remember, we still have the Boko Haram threats in some areas of the Northeast. Now, it has dawned on us, and at this point, it is reaching a point of, that's why I said civil unrest. It's no longer about the issue at hand. It's getting to a point that the regions are taking dangerous decisions among themselves. This is not how we live. This is not the Nigeria that we had. We basically promote. And I would ask the government, not just the government, the presidency, to take a rise on his mandate. This cannot be the next level that we voted for. Now, a point of reference. Obasanjo recently wrote a letter.
An open letter, yes.
And he instructed that a national conference be held. Well, some would say there's no need, etc. It's been done before. But what the overriding advice is that we need to talk.
Yes.
Secondly,
So the need for dialogue has been
the need for dialogue
overlooked over time.
Overlooked. It's been pushed aside. Jonathan made a visit, and he said he advised the presidency to implement the past confab outcome. Now, what is the need for that? Because if you realize that where are these tensions coming from, there's obviously some misunderstanding, obviously non-agreements between various parties on different issues. They've been shouting restructure, restructure. What was the purpose of restructuring? Restructuring was the outcome of us agreeing how we intend to live. Okay,
moving forward.
A man and his wife cannot stay in the same house. If the man wants 10 other wives and the first wife says, no, I want your money to go to my children's school feeding. Neither if the husband wants to come back at night and the wife says, no, you need to be with me. Two cannot work together unless
there's dialogue.
So Nigeria, we are headed in the wrong direction unless we begin to talk to ourselves.
Thank you. Thank you, Devoe. Very quickly, let's touch on this next story. 48 billion naira assets. Explain source of wealth. APC is asking Makinde. Very quickly, let's take us through the story, Gbolahan.
Well, I think this occurred on Monday, where the current governor of Oyo State declared his assets, and he not only did declare his assets, but he also made it public as well.
Governor Sheyi Makinde.
That's Governor Sheyi Makinde. So I mean, this brought a lot of uproars as to, wow, out of nowhere, this current governor is declaring his assets, and not only is he declaring it, he has made it public, and it did state that he has about he's worth 48 billion naira to everybody's surprise, his net worth. But when we're talking about the net worth, we're not only talking about cash, we're talking about shareholdings, company assets, company assets as well, so properties abroad and in Nigeria as well. And we're talking about domiciliary cash assets. But I mean, It's very refreshing to
But
see
does this call make sense to you?
Well,
in terms of, okay, explain your wealth and all that, seeing that he's
there's-
just a few weeks old in office?
No. Well, there's nothing wrong with that, because I would say it makes a lot of sense, because if somebody comes to you and says that he's worth 48 billion, there are reasons why we're asking that all elective officers declare their assets. And if it's declaring his 48 billion now, then the office is now left to the Code of Conduct Bureau to now prove that and verify that he truly does have 48 billion worth of assets. The reason being is that there are questions, and there's some people saying in some quarters that these assets are actually inflated. It could be for reasons best known to him. If after 4 years later we go down the line and find out that it's still worth 48 billion, and initially if his assets wasn't really worth this much, it's okay for you to say that your assets is worth certain amount, but then we really have to determine it's truly worth.
Right, so give it to the CCB to conduct it.
It makes a lot of sense for us to verify this one.
Produce proof of his assets.
Well, you can produce proof. It's one thing to have it on paper that you're worth this much, but it's another thing to really verify the value of these assets.
Let me quickly add that the point here is not about Sheye and his wealth. It's about the governance, right governance. Each person should ask their own governor to come out and speak the truth about their wealth. That's the idea.
Right.
Sincerity of purpose is evidence.
Thank you.
All right,
It's a good step in the right direction.
Thank you. All right, let's go to the next story, Devoe. I'll stay with you for this one. Again, Sanwo-Olu declares free passage for motorists at Lekki Axis. This is sounds like music to Lagosians' ears, particularly not just because of the money, also for the ease of traffic. So please tell us a bit more. He says he's doing a bit of investigation.
Yes. I like the technicality our governors, and as those who on the Lekki route experienced about 5 days ago, they carried out a traffic simulation to see if they could deal with the huge backlog that traffic. Man hours wasted in traffic, because the Lekki route is a single route to that whole zone.
Yes.
Over 2 million people in just that little area. Now, the governor said, working with consultants, that they would allow free passage to see whether they're trying to make calculations as to see how this would work out at the end of the day. Now, he said the cost of the toll borne in this period will be borne by the government. So there's an awoof coming from government. However, people should know that the Lekki Express route was a third example of PPP, that's public-private partnerships. However, at the end of the day, government bought it back. Now, one thing I would say is this. In their calculation, they should stress just pass freely.
Why? Because in most of those cases, you do not have physical areas erected. It's just somewhere most visible
at the top.
And in most of these places, they work. You don't have situations where you have money on your e-tag, you pass through and it doesn't allow you go through, because you have technical issues.
What happens is it's not based on debit. What happens is that as many times as you pass, just like you have a license, they tag the license and ensure that at the end of the day, because you have an identification, they send the bill to your house.
Yes.
So just like they're doing with the cameras currently, which are supposed to be identified, that's what they want to consider. Secondly, they might have a mixed toll whereby some use e-tag and the rest go, until they get their bill. And then lastly, the long-term solution, fourth mainland.
A lot of all the politicians who has perpetrated a lot of election malpractices, left, right, and center, even before and while the elections were being conducted. So the statement he's making now is that even NAFDAC has a lot more powers than INEC does. That NAFDAC actually has the powers to actually shut down stores or shops that are under their purview, but they do not have the legal powers to actually shut down any political party, and that they've attempted it several times, haven't actually been successful at doing that.
Yes.
Because of course the matter has gone up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has ruled that it is not exactly in the Constitution, and that INEC doesn't really have the powers to limit the number of political parties. And of course, just as you said, at our last elections, we had about 91 political parties.
And 92 following the court's order.
Exactly. And it created a lot of confusion. I mean, these political parties, most of the time, are created just as conduit for generating revenue. They really do not have any. Exactly. So, you have a big political party because they're set up. But a couple of months before the elections, you find out that, even days before the elections, you find out that these political parties sudden adopt a bigger political
Alright, so
party for some strange reason.
in line with that, he highlighted something quite important. He talked about the fact that Republic of Benin, Niger, Chad, and even India have loads of parties, more than we have in Nigeria.
Yes.
However, the difference, for instance, in India is that they have regional and national parties. Do you think that should be adopted in Nigeria?
Well, I mean, when we're looking at adopting the India's style of
Or just of the
governance
party,
itself, yeah.
not government,
India,
but party.
India, yeah, the party system. India is a vast country, of course.
Yeah.
We're talking about a population of over 1 billion compared to Nigeria, and when we're now looking at adopting that sort of system in terms of having regional parties, we do sort of like practice that style anyway. ABGA is more or less like a regional party at the moment now. It's nothing new to have that, and something that is currently ongoing. But the main issue is really addressing the problem of political parties that do not really have much to offer and do not really have, there's no difference. There are no ideologies in these political parties, but people just set up political parties for the purpose of just making money.
Yeah. Do you think the constitution makes it quite easy? So we'll have to go revisit that, because like he mentioned, when they try to shut down these parties, they go to the Supreme Court, they go to court, the Supreme Court then,
I think one thing that of course we
goes
also
in
have to
favor.
bear in mind is that INEC does not have as much powers as we think.
So empower them.
We need to empower them. There needs to be a lot more legislation to empower the political parties. A typical example is what happened with Roches.
Okay.
I mean, there was a back and forth where they held his what was it? It wasn't actually giving
They
his
withdrew his certificate.
his certificate.
Yeah.
But eventually they had to release that certificate and now take the matter to the courts. Now we don't know how far that is going now. It's expected that they're supposed to prosecute the matter on. If they feel like there were violence in the process, then they need to take it to court, and let's see what happens at the end of the day.
Thank you very much. Devoe, let me come to you for this, but let's take a few comments before we proceed.
All right, we have this one from Ian because he says, "Good morning, guys. I think it was wrong for Governor Sheyi Makinde, for him to add company assets to his personal assets. APC should also relax. He has not also declared his combined liabilities. No need to get overly excited." And Rainmaker says, it's a long message, Rainmaker. Please, we'll try to summarize it. It says, on the Northern leaders calling back their headers, if history was right or is right, in the mid-1960s, that's how people of the IBO extractions were calling back their people. A year later, the civil war broke out. There may not be a civil war this time, but this divided interest will not do us any good. I will say that the ethnic leaders were blowing hot without caution a few weeks ago.
Thank you. Let's go on to our next story. Devoe, Lagos decries vandalism, looting of government property, seeks citizen support. So the Lagos state government has decried vandalism and looting, particularly of its housing projects, which oftentimes leads to setbacks in delivering some of its scheme. We've talked about maintenance as being one of the biggest challenges when it comes to infrastructure in our state in Nigeria, but here they're actually accusing citizens of being perpetrators of violence, if I put it that way, against the buildings and infrastructure.
Yeah,
Can you please take us through this?
Before the fact, the maintenance comes after the fact.
Yeah.
Now, this is the Permanent Secretary of Housing, Ministry of Housing, Wasiu Sola, stating the state government's commitment to ensure that the housing needs are met and that they're non-negotiable. Now, what's going on? They're saying that currently many of the housing estates that are in the pipeline, are being looted, and items like fixtures, transformers, electric poles, aluminium, and various things are being taken away along the way. Now they're asking for community leaders and those residents around such areas to combine efforts and to ensure that such places are secured. Question mark, state government, why are you asking residents to secure your own assets? I mean, it just begs questions, because they say that those who live around some of those establishments are in the best position. However, I know Lagos State makes some good IGR. I think these are places that you can create some form of local employment, especially for a lot of the youths. Now, some of the locations that they visited was Igbeshe, Igbobo, Agbowa, Ado, Anosa, Ayon, Delu, and then some others, and they were saying that some of them had been looted in various ways. Another means was also to accelerate the project completion timeline to ensure that some of these estates get completed on time. Now, obviously, they're being built with taxpayers' money, so expect them to be done well. Likewise, I also expect that, I hope that these estates cover all the demographics involved, because that's another issue. When the residents or whoever are the people looting feel that they're not partaking in some of these things at the end of the day, you start to see these kind of behavior. Now, it should cover those who are wealthy. The housing estate should also cover civil servants and also low-income earning individuals, which we've not done in a long time. The likes of Jakonde estates, Go-On estates, etc. We need to see more of those in today's administration.
All right, thank you very much. Finally, touch on the next story. EFCC to investigate fraudulent mobilization of calls members. It talks about the fact that some of these members who are presented to them by universities haven't actually attended that university.
Yes, in some cases they're not even qualified. Now, the Brigadier General is saying that corruption has risen, and they're asking the EFCC to work with them to ensure that they investigate the cases of schools that do present unqualified students, both within the country, and they even mentioned a case of Benin Republic where graduates were presented that did not even attend. Now, I find this funny because I didn't even know that foreign schools were also presenting students for NYC within the country. But we understand that corruption has eaten into the fabric of every sphere within the country. I really do wonder how the NYC did come to this understanding of knowing that some of these students were unqualified. What I would say is that sometime now, the quality of education has so tanked that even NYC graduates cannot write an application letter in their.
It's shocking.
Yes. It's that bad.
All right, thank you very much. We take some comments now.
And then Chris, excuse me, Chris sent in his message, says current INEC is full of excuses. Perhaps may not have powers to register political parties, but it has powers to regulate the activities of the parties. With imaginative regulation, INEC can prune the number of political parties. Why are we saddled with people who just throw their hands up in the air when faced with problems they are appointed to fix, rather than put up their thinking caps? Enough of this mediocrity, please. Chris, they're being more outspoken and just being clear as to the areas of authority that they have under their purview. Bengals says most of these political parties are there to constitute a nuisance in the political space in this country. I think the laws should be strengthened so that only the serious-minded people are allowed to form a political party. This Tom, Dick, and Harry philosophy of registering political parties is really not working. And Lukman sent this one.
He says, was that Devoe Okorie giving props to Sanwo-Olu on Amzat? I wonder what his stake is on the $5,000 each for all the Super Eagles players. Unfortunately, we don't have time to take that. Oh, you think it's B?
Where's the B?
All right.
Thank you, Devoe. And thank you, Gbolahan, Mr. G Quest. Let us stay with us. Next is sports at 8:15.
The headlines.